organise the first Fair Luxury Open House of 2023. So it seems like a very long time since the last one, so it's really good to be back. And I guess it's still appropriate for me to say Happy New Year to you at this point, even though we're on the 18th. So just a little bit of housekeeping. As you probably noticed when you logged on, this session is being recorded. So just to make you aware of that. And I have to say, I'm really excited today to be introducing this discussion on inclusivity in the jewellery industry. Specifically today, we're looking at the experiences of people in the LGBTQIA+ community, both as members of our industry, of our trade, but also looking at people outside of the industry. So in other words, our customers and the people that we rely on to make all of our livings. So we're looking at both aspects. And I think many of the open house sessions that we have run over the last few years have been on almost like the nuts and bolts of the day-to-day things that we do, especially as makers. So we've been looking at things like gold and diamonds, gemstones, that kind of thing. And of course, those topics are really important. Those were the topics that caused Fair Luxury for the community to come into being at the beginning, at the outset. However, I know that many of us in the Fair Luxury community take our commitment to improvement, self-improvement, doing things better beyond the scope of the our day-to-day businesses. So I think possibly more than many of the topics that we have covered thus far during the open house sessions, the one today is one of those that applies probably more broadly in the context of our daily lives. So the inspiration, if you like, the idea for this session came from my good friend Brandy Lallo, who has been instrumental, I think, in driving this topic in the USA, and certainly the discussion of the things that we're going to talk about today. And Brandy very kindly, I didn't hardly have to twist her arm at all, she offered to be our panel facilitator today. So good morning, Brandy, and thank you for joining us fairly early today from New York.
Thank you, Stuart. And who could say no to you?
Oh, you're too kind, too kind. And alongside Brandy today, also from the USA, we are welcoming Tracy Carswell. Tracy is founder of the jewelry brand Powerful in Pink, and also co-founder of the Queer Metalsmiths community. And I look forward to hearing more about that during the conversation later. We also have, based in Philadelphia, we have Sam Melandra Myers. Sam is the sales specialist at Emily Chelsea Jewelry. And we also have, representing the UK, so no pressure at all, Emma Barnes, founder of jewelry company Wild Fawn, which is based here in London. So welcome to you all. Thank you very much for agreeing to be with us today, to be our panel. I think I'm not going to take up any more time with any lengthy kind of bios or intros of our guests. I think we'll hear from them directly. I think it's much more important today that we hear from the guests themselves rather than me waffling on any longer. So it is with really great pleasure that I want to hand over to Brandy to start the conversation. Brandy, over to you.
Thank you, Stuart. And thank you all for being here. And mostly thank you to our panelists today, because this is not an easy topic. Like Stuart said, it is very personal. It's not like we're talking about lab-grown diamonds. or conflict diamonds or something of the like. We're talking about human beings here. And so I really appreciate that you all have agreed graciously to join us to tell some stories and to have this discussion, because in the end of the day, talking about it is really what is going to get us sort of over this barrier of not understanding the community. So thank you again. And thank you to the Fair Lux community for supporting us in this. We appreciate it. So I would like to start with just a very quick kind of, I don't know, summary, which is basically that, equality for this community, LGBTQIA plus people, is really about basic human values and needs, and the ability of everyday humans to pursue health and happiness and to earn a living and be safe in their communities and serve their country or take care of the ones they love. And when we move away from the abstract technical language and towards discussions like this that connect people to common ground and common values, true understanding of this topic can take root. So I hope you'll find in this conversation that if you're conflicted or undecided or anything, that you better understand the issues in order to be an ally or helpful, as these folks really need support because it's not always easy out there. So LGBTQIA, what does that mean? So I'm just going to read what that means, and then we're going to talk to each panelist about why having this terminology means something to you and why it's important. And so for those who don't know, LGBTQIA is lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer or questioning, intersex, and asexual or allies. So you have this definition. It's rare that a group of people sort of gets all these titles. But let's start with Sam, because you're the first in my queue here, and tell me a little bit about why it is important as a member of this community to be recognized as part of the community, and why people should be using these pronouns or this terminology.
Hi, so my name's Sam. I use they, them pronouns, and it's important for me that space is made for everybody, regardless of how they identify. I personally identify as queer, but knowing that when I, walk into a space, somebody's not just going to look at me, assume that I use she, her pronouns, assume that I'm a woman, assume what I want in a jewelry store or out of an interaction because of those assumptions. It's really just making a space for everyone to just be who they are and not having that be something that they have to either A, explain, or B, just not interact with you because they don't feel comfortable explaining. And that's kind of how I try to keep that in mind as I walk through my day-to-day life, every time I interact with somebody. And that's important both in my position as a sales specialist at Emily Chelsea Jewelry, but also just as a human trying to be decent to everybody.
Thanks, Sam. And how about you, Tracy?
Hi. Tracy, glad to be here. This is such a great conversation to be having. And my pronouns are also they, them. Identify as queer and non-binary. And I have been multiple letters in this alphabet already, throughout that. I think as a member of the LGBTQIA plus community, what these letters represent is an opportunity for belonging, right? It's a way to find your community, and it's something that could either be gate kept, and keep people out, but it also provides the opportunity for us to connect and join. Yeah, I know that my experience as a non-binary person and my own journey of like going through who am I and my pronouns, it definitely impacts how I interact with other people, because I've learned that, you know, it's not always what you seem. You know,
it's truth. Thank you, Tracy. And Emma, same question to you, please.
I think someone's microphone's on. Rosie.
Can everybody please mute if you're not speaking?
I think it's Rosie Crab from what I can tell. Sorry, Rosie. So for me, I would say I agree with you, Tracy. It's that it is definitely really lovely to feel part of a community if you're not following the heteronormative way that society works, knowing that there's somewhere you can belong with people that go through a similar thing to you. It's definitely really empowering. For me, I've been with my partner who identifies as a woman for 11 years now, and before that I've been in same-sex relationships. So definitely for the majority of my adult life I've been in the community, and I'm always trying to work on my brand to make it as inclusive as possible. And I think just because you're a member of the community doesn't mean that we do things perfectly all the time. It's really hard when the society around us, you're being pushed certain messaging. Sometimes you forget that you may somehow be inadvertently contributing to it. And it takes a lot of introspection to realize what we could do better. And that's what I'm constantly working on with Wild Fawn. So.
Yeah, Emma, I think all great points from everybody. I think number one, it's really important not to assume anybody's pronouns. That's number one. And number two, sorry, let's just do don't assume. Okay, so I'd like to start also now talking a little bit more about your own personal experiences. And so Tracy, can we start with you? You are a designer, but you also started this organization here in the States called Queer Metalsmiths. Tell me a little bit about what you do and what led you to creating this organization.
Sure. So I'm an artist. Along my journey, I've had the opportunity to also get to work in many different kinds of jobs. One of them was an LGBTQ youth programs in a community center. And I think that was one of the places where I got to learn a lot about my privilege and the intersections of different identities, right? Like being queer, being a white person, being a person of color, having economic resources, not having them, right? And so that really solidified the importance of community for us. It's literally life-saving. And in 2020, I was actually I was helping Kendria Smith with Metalsmiths for Change. She was doing some fundraising where artists gathered together, donated their work or made pieces, and that was sold, and the money was raised and went to different organizations supporting Black folks. And being a part of these community spaces, I was just in awe of how supportive people were. And we were doing an event for the LGBTQ community, and I was like, where's my people? Like, where are my people who are metalsmiths and who are queer? And Queer Metalsmiths, the idea for it came out, and I was like, this is a community I want to build. So I kind of put it on the shelf because I wanted it to be something that we built as a community. So over the years, people have come in and we've started to build this community. And last year we had the opportunity to showcase 20 artists in a virtual exhibition for New York City Jewelry Week called Queerphoria, where they got to share about their relationship to their identity and their relationship to joy as makers, as artists, as people in the community. So it has just shown how important it is for us within this community to find our people, right? Whether that's, you know, if you're suppliers, you're queer, right? You find your people who can get it, who have your back, who support you. And I think that's what we're getting to do with Queer Metalsmiths. We have the opportunity to really provide a safe space for our folks where they can get access to resources that support them as jewelers and metalsmiths, but have that added layer of, we get it. You know, we get it. This is a safe place. We get your pronouns, we get your identity, we get your experience, or have the space to get it, you know? So it's really exciting.
In the vein of being educational, I think so many people know those common terms, lesbian, bisexual, gay. What does queer mean?
So it's interesting because queer, you know, back in the day, right? That was a you know, it was something that you would say like to insult someone, right? A slur, that's the word I was looking for. My brain was searching. And our community has been able to reclaim that word, right? And I think it means different things for different people. So I can share what it means for me, right? Because ultimately, you know, and I'm learning this with Queer Metalsmiths too, is right, we don't represent every single person. We can't ever encompass all the different identities just because we're part of the community. So queer for me is kind of an umbrella term, right? Because I've been bisexual, I've been gay, I've been lesbian, now I'm queer. I also, you know, find myself on the trans spectrum. So for me, at some point, queer became a way to just be like, I'm part of the fam, you know, I'm part of the group, not quite sure where to put me, you know, I'm non-binary. I don't identify as a woman. I used to. My partner's a woman. She identifies as a lesbian, but she's not with a woman, right? So it's a great umbrella term. And I think it encompasses the intention for me, especially with Queer Metalsmiths, is to just have it be that umbrella. You know, have it be a space where no matter where you are in that beautiful rainbow, you're welcome here.
Awesome. Sam, do you want to add anything to that?
I mean, I think, you know, Tracy hit some really great points on the head. I, you know, also had a similar experience with finding my own personal identities, you know, so coming out when I was very young, moving through different labels, and now just being like, I don't even know if a label is a necessity. I think that there's a lot about being a lesbian that I identify with, but I don't identify as a woman. So like some people would say I'm not allowed to be a lesbian. There's a whole lot of, and that happens within the community too. You know, I've had situations where people were like very confused by my gender identity and then tried to like keep me out of like, I don't know. There's been issues and situations where I'm just like, I don't feel like any of these labels specifically apply to me, but I know that I am. And so I find myself gravitating towards more like open language when it comes to identifying myself like queer. And because it also changes on a daily, sometimes multiple times a day basis. And so I feel as though opening myself up and being less limiting to myself is kind of ultimately what I have found in the label queer. And I find that also with community, because through queer, I can be, you know, in community with everybody. I'm not just in community with one sect of, the alphabet. Even though I think that there is absolutely power and importance within that, because, like Tracy said, I also find myself on the trans, spectrum in that kind of area of the community. And I also feel a sort of safety and kinship within that community. But yeah, I feel as though it's the larger overarching kind of sphere. And it also helps me as somebody who always wants to create safe spaces for other people. That's kind of, one of those names of my games. I started queer student advocacy at University of the Arts. I don't think it's around anymore. I think it's a subsect of their student government now, while I was there. And, that gave me a whole lot of community and moving forward in spaces that prioritize queer people, and the advancement of that community and protection.
Awesome. And I definitely plan to come back to that community term, because clearly that is very important. But before I do that, Emma, I know you have an interesting story about your brand and how your sexuality or your gender played into that. So can you tell us a little bit about Wild Fawn?
So yeah, I mean, I don't know exactly what you're referring to, but if there's a specific pinpoint moment, but Wild Fawn really for me was I'd always, I don't know, been creative, drawn a lot when I was younger. Definitely when I was, I suppose, sort of realizing who I was, and fell in love with my first girlfriend. It was a time before Instagram and all of this stuff, so I spent a lot of time drawing, painting, and basically to help process the whole thing, I kept it a secret for 2 years, being with someone. So I definitely used my creative side, or my impulse to be creative, to deal with a lot of emotions. And I think, I mean, I was actually speaking to someone who works for me today. Jewelry has always been really important for me, and it's a strange thing that I've only just come to realize that. I mean, it's been majorly symbolic, and the time that I was going through all this, I was working at a jewelry brand here in the UK called Accessorize. I don't know if there's one of those in the US, if they carry it over there, but yeah, that's like when I properly started to fall in love with jewelry. And it's obviously all made in, I don't know, factories overseas by workers who have no rights, but that's when I really started to fall in love with jewelry. And I think I've always felt a connection to it from then, really. And I started it really as a hobby, and making jewelry taught myself. And then I managed to be able to do it full time, and I've grown the brand since then. And for me, it's always been really important to just highlight how it's even in the product listings and the wedding band consultation pages on the website, I make it really important to say, we welcome LGBTQIA people into the workshop. I think even just having it there is really important, because I've felt, it's just tiny things, I suppose straight people don't really think about, is that just going into a hotel with you and your girlfriend, and it's a double room, and I'm always thinking, oh, are they looking at me thinking, oh, did they need to book a twin room? That sort of thing. So I just really want to make it obvious as much as I can, for our customers to, feel comfortable, because I've been in situations where I've felt uncomfortable, and you don't really realize it until you've been through that. And also you don't realize how comfortable you can make someone feel with just a single sentence on a web page.
Sure. Thanks so much. I think that's a huge, piece of the jewelry industry, is that we've grown up in an industry that focuses on typically a man giving a piece of jewelry, whether it be for an engagement or anything. It's a man giving it to a woman. And we've built ad campaign after ad campaign and marketing campaign after marketing campaign on this topic. So I want to go to Sam, because I know you work in a store that's really, really open. And so can you tell me a little bit about the merchandising of Emily Chelsea Jewelry and how that's different than a typical jewelry store?
Absolutely, happily. So just to kind of give you a baseline about Emily Chelsea Jewelry, Emily, who I'm pretty sure is in the meeting, so hi if you are. So the whole impetus of this was that Emily was at a wedding industry conference on inclusivity, and she realized that she was the only jeweler in the room, and she was like, whoa, kind of taken aback by that, and then really kind of stuck her foot in it when it came to making sure that she was outwardly facing and authentically inclusive to the LGBTQ plus community, just to be kind of, while she's not an individual face of the LGBTQ community, she is one of a great example of an ally. I mean, she was the one who was invited to be a panelist on this board and opened the door for me to be on it. So I think that that is like, if you're going to put ally on, a website, to do it authentically, to open doors for other people. I think that's actively being an ally, and that's what it means to do that. And so when we're doing that kind of thing behind the scenes, that's not something that Emily's going to talk about. She's probably blushing about it right now. I can't see you, so you probably are. But that kind of authenticity behind the scenes really is obvious within the way that we sell our jewelry, because of the fact that somebody's going to come in and ask for a men's band, but we don't really recognize any specific ring as a men's band or a woman's band. If it fits you, it fits you, and it's your ring. And so when you are on our website, you'll see bands with just together, and then you can sample that through texture or with stones or plain. And then, you'll see thin bands and wide bands grouped together in our case, rather than like, these are for women and these are for men. Because even if you do identify in a cis heteronormative way, cisgender meaning that you identify with what the sex you were given at birth was, if you identify that way, sometimes you're going to want something that isn't prescribed to your gender. So like, we have plenty of cisgender men who come in and get 2 millimeter wide bands that they wouldn't have ever been shown at a different jewelry store. So it really goes beyond, just making space for other people, even though that is the impetus of it. It's making space for everyone to feel comfortable. And in the same way that that opens doors for the LGBTQ plus community, it opens doors for everyone to express themselves in their own individual way. And I think that that is the beauty of, when somebody comes in offering everybody to try on rings, because what if they both want engagement rings? What if they're not calling it an engagement ring, it's in a commitment band? Those are really big things that, drives us, is making sure that rather than prescribing something to someone, we're describing it to see if they want it, to see if they like it, that kind of thing.
Great. Emma, when you have, someone who comes in or is shopping with you, if we have this openness now, how do you approach that conversation about what kind, what are they looking for? What are they shopping for?
Well, we have the same with our wedding bands. We don't say, female, male. We just have them on one page and, say thick things. It's just, when they come in, we just have them all out in front of them, and they are there. They can just pick and choose whatever they want, and they can normally discuss with their partner what they like, and we sort of leave them to have a bit of space by themselves. So we're not hovering over them, listening in. They have time to really think about what they want, and without fear of judgment. And that's really important for them. I think they naturally want to have a bit of a discussion with themselves anyway. And it's a really private thing to choose a wedding band, and it's a special moment. And I think being the makers and being there with them in consultations, you forget, because you do it so much, that it's actually a big moment for them and something they've been looking forward to. So yeah, we just try to keep it as much about them as possible without us interfering. We'll just give the qualities, I don't know, the carat of gold. But other than that, we'll only offer suggestions if they ask for any help or advice. We definitely just have a hands-off approach to things like consultations.
It's so funny in our business. One of the main differences, I think, in shopping for jewelry than any other product out there is this quote unquote barrier, which is the salesperson or the unit with which the jewelry is housed. You must come up and ask someone to show you something. And so in a space where we're so conditioned to ask in a certain way, I love that you guys and your salespeople, et cetera, are not making assumptions and allowing people to see what they love.
I think as well,
Tracy.
Oh, sorry.
Tracy. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say as well, I think what a lot of people tend to do if they do feel a bit uncomfortable is just simply buy offline off these bigger shops. They find out their own size somehow and they'll just buy offline, so they don't even have to have an interaction with anyone because they are a bit worried about being judged or how they might come across, or that initial reaction if they have to tell the salesperson anything about themselves that they might have experienced something negative about in the past. So I think opening the door and being really open and being forthcoming about how we're allies and part of the community, at the end of the day it will increase sales for your brand because people feel more comfortable and they'll come in and have a chat with you. So
yeah, it's all about that personal connection for sure. I know when I've worked in a store, I feel like a psychologist, quite frankly. Tracy, how does this influence? You're an artist. How does all these heteronormativeness or these terms, how does it affect the way you design or the products that you create? Or does it not, for that matter?
Well, I think that the relationship for me is the relationship to materials. Right, the relationship to what I'm creating and building, where I hear, I don't sell my work in a store in person, so I hear that I hear two different pieces, right? I hear there's how we develop our relationship to other people, right? How do we interact with folks? Because that's what this is all about. We're creating memories. We're providing something really special for folks. So I think that for me, the relationship is more to the material. How are these materials and these textures going to show up for people? And I've never made gendered jewelry. I've just always made stuff that I think is beautiful because I like the texture, because I like the shape of it. That's my materials are queer because they flow through me, right? The designs flow through me. And it's interesting because that was one of the topics we talked about in Queerphoria. And we asked these artists like how they relate to their materials. And I think, whatever we do, we do it through our own lens, right? And it's kind of like glasses, like we all have a different view. So even when I make something, you see it completely differently. I think that I lost my train of thought. But it's my brain is like, there's so many things to talk about. But
I think overall jewelry is a representation, of something important, or a token of something important, whether that's you as an individual or as a gift, as a memory, as a symbol. And I guess at the end of the day, does that really matter what is, what we're labeled? No, what really matters is, do we love it? And is it meaningful?
Yep.
Because that's, jewelry is sort of that ultimate connection of meaning and substance.
And we get to, as folks in the industry, we get to impact what that meaning looks like, right? Like we create the space for, like this degendered jewelry, because it's metal, it's mineral. If we really get down to the basics and the facts of it, like we're dealing with, materials from the earth that somebody put their time and effort in. Well, many people put their time and effort into, and getting it to the end user. And there's such a great opportunity to shift, especially for folks watching this, right? Is to really shift how you look at men's jewelry, women's jewelry, right? Does it need to be that? And I also know that we're in an industry that has deep roots, right? People have been making jewelry for thousands of years, and people have been getting married, and people have been giving jewelry for thousands of years. And so there's some really deep patterns that we just walk into, being a part of this industry. And I think the opportunity is for, if you're someone outside the community, is to, be part of these kinds of conversations, and then find ways to let the community know that you're a safe space. If you have a store shop, like I just moved, and I'm walking around and I look for those little stickers that have the rainbow or have the flag on it, because I know when I walk in there with my partner that, there's at least a minimal layer of safe space there,
I do want to ask about that, actually, because that sort of brings me a bit into the topic of marketing to this community. And as consumer facing, Emma and Sam, how important is it that you have that flag or that identity, or to immediately, talk to someone about their identity? Do we need to do that? How?
So I can say that I think that it is absolutely necessary as long as it's authentic. So I keep saying this thing that you need to be authentic. It's so obvious to at least the LGBTQ people that I know that, if there's just a brand who's going to put up a flag for Pride Month because they're going to make money off of a well-resourced and usually undertapped and underserved community, capitalism-wise, we can see right through it, at least the folks that I know in the industry. And so it is important to have it there, but it's important to follow it up with your actions. So for example, we have LGBTQ ally, I believe, in like our Instagram bio. It's like the first thing that you read when you come to our website is that we make jewelry for everyone. And that is a really great sign to the folks who Google us or something of that nature, as to the kind of experience that they're going to have. But it's really when they go through and read our Google reviews, it's really when they go through our Instagram feed and see every type of, wedded partnership that you can see represented year round. That's when our clients are like, I'm going to make the trip from Texas to here. I'm going to work with you digitally from Portland instead of, going into a shop that's down the street. That's when you're starting to see those really important decisions about where these people are spending their money and spending their time and making these memories with us. There's so many stories that I've heard of people making like an entire weekend trip to come out to work with us because they didn't feel comfortable working with somebody in their own home. And they knew that they would feel comfortable with us because they were able to see it in the way that we represent ourselves in our online platforms.
Sam, can you tell the group the story that you shared with us when we met previously to this? Because I think it's just so wonderful, and it would be a disservice if you didn't.
I think Emily might have actually shared the one that, or am I thinking about the same thing? Well, we have plenty of stories, so I can talk to you about our clients coming from far and abroad. Most recently, we actually had 2 clients who they're in a same-sex couple, same-sex relationship. They're in the process of getting their rings right now. We're settled on the center stone and the design. We're really excited about it. But we had been working together since August via Zooms and emails back and forth because they actually lived long distance to each other. So one of them lives in New York and one of them lives in Maine. And they really wanted to go through the process together. They wanted to have correlating rings that they felt really comfortable and happy with when it comes to knowing that their ring was made by somebody who has both the ethics of, like using recycled diamonds, using recycled gold, finding, ethically sourced gemstones, things like that. That was very important to them. And then they also knew that they were going to feel welcome and safe to make rings that they really wanted to make for themselves and each other with us. And so they actually made a trip down to us, actually multiple times now. They've been at the shop twice throughout this process so far. And it's really just because they felt that we were going to best represent their relationship. They had been sized in another spot and they felt really uncomfortable. They didn't feel as though they were being shown the things that they really wanted to see. And when they started working with us, they realized right away, just through a Zoom conversation, without having from the same exact seat that I always do right now, that they knew they were going to be heard and seen both for their love and what they wanted in their rings. And that happens all the time.
Isn't that just a basic human sort of function, that we want to be seen, we want to be spoken to, we want to be a part of something. And it is truly amazing that it takes effort, to do this, but it is, it is what it is now. And I guess, again, through conversations like this, we can slowly take that apart a bit. I want to go back to Emma because I was reading a little bit about your brand. I too am involved with sustainability, which is a tough word, but in responsible business practices. I know that your brand is based on a lot of that. And so I imagine this inclusiveness is part of it, but tell us a little bit more about that side of your business and why that's important as it relates.
I think because when I started the brand, I did it as a hobby, and I didn't know much about the jewelry industry at all. And I had the decision, the first time I bought silver, there was an option to buy recycled or not recycled. And it just blew my mind that people would buy the not recycled when there was the option to buy the more eco-friendly option. So it was about then, I've always grown my own vegetables and all of that. I don't know, my dad works on a farm. Well, he has a farm, so he's a farmer, and I've always been into and interested in the environment. But I think for me, what really, you've got the eco-friendly side of and sustainability, but then you've also got the ethical side of it too. And obviously, I think both are as important. Well, they're both very important, but for me, it's more about the people and the people who are making the jewelry and the people who are mining the gemstones. And it's hard to, when you're running a business and you don't have like a massive marketing budget and people doing it full time, where do you put your focus? Do you put it on sustainability and really go for that side? Do you put it on the ethical side of the business? Or all of the other things you could shout about that are amazing about small brands. But it's always just been really important to me to talk about the people that make the jewelry, and there's a story behind the actual human beings involved. There's so many brands these days, the bigger ones, that say, oh yeah, recycled silver, it's 100% recycled silver. But it just infuriates me. It's like, but who is making this? Where is it being made? And customers who aren't in the industry might not even understand that there are human beings out there that are working in awful conditions, making the jewelry, but they think it's great because it's made from recycled silver and gold. And it's really easy to get your hands on recycled silver and gold. So I think for me, people are the main part of my brand and what I want to push, and the team who work for me and their stories are the most important thing. And I, like this year, we've been working on strategy just this week, and really want to push the team more and stories behind the people that make the jewelry and who post the jewelry. And so for me, that's I would say my key marketing thing, because it's what I feel most passionately about. So it just makes most sense for me to go down that avenue.
Yeah, the tie-in there is people, right? Is whether you're focused on the people at the beginning of the supply chain or in the middle or the end customer or even yourself. We are in a people business, and we have to be respectful and understanding of everyone that is involved in the creation or purchase of our product. So that's why I wanted to sort of just tie that in. I always like to do these panels and give a little something to learn. And so Sam, I'm wondering if you can't share any events or anything sort of special that you've done as a part of Emily Chelsea Jewelry that possibly could be thought about by a retail jeweler or a designer that goes into a store, something that was successful.
I don't think I have like a specific event or anything of that nature, but I can definitely say that there are a few things that we kind of all have as employees here at Emily Chelsea Jewelry, where I believe it's from the Equally Wed industry folks. There's two lovely people who run it, but there is a course, and you can become like an Equally Wed Pro, and it's a certified like industry professional when it comes to working with LGBTQ+ people. It kind of just gives you like a literal certification in just being inclusive, I guess. But it's a great course, and it gives you a lot of literature. It tells you about places all over the world. Thank you so much, Emily. There's now a link in the chat. And it was a really great course. I knew a lot of the information just from being an LGBTQ person myself, but there is a lot of information that might be eye-opening to somebody who's from outside of our community within the industry. And it is definitely focused on weddings and like wedding industry, but we're absolutely an arm of that in any way that you look at it. So that's definitely something that I would highly suggest. Just otherwise supporting open houses or like this, or other times, like if you're going to a gem fair or something like that, and you get a survey and it's like, hey, what did you think of these things that we offered? What do you want to see offered in the future? Talk about wanting to see inclusivity you talked about at these events. Anything that you go to can have conversations like this. There are LGBTQ+ people in every industry. There are people who do this kind of conversation for a living. And lots of times larger venues are even able to pay people, which is important. And every time that an industry or like an event type conference is hearing like, oh, you want to hear about inclusivity, that gets written down. It goes into somebody's notebook for next year, and that's how we have more conversations like this. So I think that those are all things that you can be doing. And I think Emma and I also talked on this or touched on it earlier, just like degendering your jewelry. There's no reason to call a diamond ring, a women's ring. Anybody can rock a diamond. We all know that. And so I think that is just kind of base level.
It's someone said to me the other day, which totally blew my mind, that they have a hard time promoting this area, I guess I'll call it, because SEO doesn't recognize it as much as you would a traditional, so the word, we even have to now change the words that Google looks at in order to make change. I think it's just incredible how many different layers one can look at and recognize that we need to change. Tracy, any advice this will be my last question, and then we can go to Q&A. Tracy, any advice you want to give this group in terms of being good allies, welcoming us into queer metalsmiths, and what can we do as a whole or as individuals?
That's a really great question. So first of all, it's showing up to things like this, right? And hearing different perspectives, just like anything else. I mean, what we're talking about here is relationships and people. It keeps coming up everywhere, and that's all there is to do is, like, how do you be a great human? And I think educating yourself is the first step. What's with the pronouns? And I think I saw someone say that too. I know we'll talk about that too, but like, I think learning is the first part, right? So that you can authentically say that you're an ally. And I think something that when we're having like a diversity conversation, we also, need to recognize that people have different intersections of identities, right? Like we haven't touched on the intersection of race and gender and orientation, right? Because that's a whole nother layer of how do we create a safe space for folks, right? We're a white panel, right? So that's just something else too, is educating yourself, and then, finding places or ways to be brave. And, sometimes it does take something to put that sticker on the outside of your door, or to put that note on your website, or to put a note on your table, at a fair. But I think more and more existing allies will be like, I want to work with this company. How do I work with someone who's this, or what's that?
Was this open, this
right?
Authentic?
And I think I'm going to touch on pronouns because I saw someone say it. So we all have pronouns, right? That's, we're speaking the English language, we use pronouns. And I think that more and more, wherever you can say, and this is for me too, because I make assumptions. I still make assumptions, even though I'm a they, them. Is to say, hey, my pronouns are this. What are your pronouns? Or
people may not even realize that that's okay to say, to ask.
I think that's it. For me, when it comes to pronouns, because I'm a newer they, them, I've been a she, her for a long time. So there are a lot of folks who I think are afraid of making mistakes. For me, and this is, of course, again, my experience, right? Like, we don't speak for everybody in the community. But for me, like, I would rather have someone ask. I'd rather have someone make a mistake and correct themselves than to not do anything at all.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's being seen.
Sure. Thank you. Okay, Stuart, I'm going to sort of move to you with questions. I know that some did come up in the chat, and then we can kind of wrap it up.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, everyone. It's been amazing. As I suspected, and as I knew, we would run out of time. We've really only scratched the surface of so many topics that we could continue talking about for hours now. So I've got a few questions that have come up in the chat. I would like to just start with the one that Tracy kind of answered there, and just give maybe the others an opportunity to come in on that about the pronouns, because I think that is probably something that that's a kind of the first almost barrier to entry in the conversation for a lot of people, because they'll probably get really nervous about, as Tracy was saying there, about making a mistake. Do I correct myself? What do I say? I'm not sure. So I just wondered if any of the other panelists have any thoughts on on the question about the pronouns. So the actual question was, if I can find it in my list, how does one approach pronouns coming from outside of the community with removing assumption? Should we ask prior to conversing? Was the question.
So there's a bunch of different ways that you can do this. So personally, if I am at work, I'm not asking people their pronouns because they might not feel comfortable telling me their pronouns, and that's totally okay. You can have an entire conversation with somebody, never know their pronouns, and never have to use them. So I will wait until they use their own pronouns, or if somebody else is like with them, they use their pronouns. And until then, I'll just use their name, because that is something, we're an appointment only situation. And so I always introduce myself with my name. And so generally speaking, they tell me theirs. And so that's always something that you can do. You don't need pronouns in a conversation. You can always just use their name. Especially if you're talking directly to the person, you can also just use like you, like, do you like this, or something of that nature. And then that way, you know, if you wanted to not have to broach the topic immediately with somebody upon meeting them, or if you're nervous about asking somebody and making them feel uncomfortable for any reason, you can just not use pronouns until they tell you theirs, or it comes up in conversation.
My kids once in a while got upset with me when I used she or he when I was talking about them. And I've said to them over and over again, like, I'm really trying, you know, I really want to adapt to this, but I've been taught my whole life about doing things one way. And that goes for other subjects too. So I think here it's, you know, it is important to realize that we've been trained in our brain one way, and we have to make that conscious effort. We will make mistakes, but we, you know, it's about trying. It's kind of like sustainability it is a journey.
And I also just want to say, like, I personally misgender myself. Sometimes I've been using they, them pronouns for like 6-7 years now, and I still misgender myself. My family misgenders me. It happens. It's the way that you recover. And also if you recognize that you're doing it consistently, just practice in your own brain. Like, you can tell yourself a story or a memory that you have with that person and use their new name, use their new pronouns within that story. And as long as you're consistently using that within your own mind, just like you learned their name the first time, like you're going to be able to learn their pronouns again. And when you make a mistake, just apologize, correct yourself, move on. I think that's the biggest thing that you can do.
I just want to add a little thing, because I think, like, Sam, you made a really good point, right? Like, not everybody's comfortable. You know, you might be with someone who's like, you know, I'm not going to say my pronouns in front of them because I'm not comfortable. I do think that the more that we start to normalize including our own pronouns, we don't even have to ask for others. And I'm telling this for me too, right? We open it up and then create that space for them where it's like, what are your pronouns? Or, wow, that's, you know? And even putting them in places like a name tag, email signatures, your business cards. Just starting to normalize it, because it hasn't always been this way, right? And like you said, Brandy, like, we just have old brain patterns. We were born into a binary, and we were born into language existing a certain way. And so it does take practice. And I think that's the beautiful thing. And I think also being, of course, wherever you're comfortable, but being open and authentic, like, hey, I really don't want to make a mistake because I'm committed to honoring you, right? Can you let me know what your pronouns are? It's really important that I'm clear about this, because I know it's important for me, and I want to make sure that I'm, you know, being respectful to you. So I think the more open you can be, kind of even being like, I don't know, I may make mistakes, and I'll correct myself, you know, or feel free to correct me. There's you know, I think if we take that kind of charge we have about pronouns, because it's become this like, what is this thing that we're doing? I think if we take that charge away and we just deal with like the language part, it's just doing that, you know? And it's a practice, and that's the key word, right?
Great. Thank you. That's a very comprehensive response and some really useful tips there. So now to go into a very specific question about sourcing. So this didn't come from me, although it does sound like a question that I would ask as a supplier to the jewelry industry. Do you take LGBTQIA+ rights into account when sourcing raw materials such as gold and gemstones? And if so, how do you source the information and how do you work with suppliers on the topic? Any thoughts on that? Shall we start with Emma, since I didn't ask you about that?
I was just thinking, I don't, to be honest. I get my materials from, I suppose, companies that are trustworthy, and that, to be honest, there's just a few bigger ones here in the UK that provide the gold and silver. But I might actually look into it, because if there is a way I can support, then I definitely will. And yeah, I mean, Stuart, I get my gemstones from you, so I know you're a good ally. But apart from that, I don't, but I'm definitely going to look into it.
Anyone else, Tracy or Sam, want to comment on that one?
I so appreciate that question, because it just shows me another place where I haven't looked. You know, I think for me, I build relationships. So it's the first step is finding the relationship with someone who sources ethically, right? And then from there, I think there's an opportunity, and this is something that you know, like queer metalsmiths, we'd like to at some point be able to participate in facilitating spaces or conversations for folks who are part of the industry in other ways. I think a lot of times they may not always have the luxury of having these kinds of conversations or being able to be out. And I don't know, but I'm assuming. So thank you for that question, and thank you for the opportunity to look. And I hope we can find some resources or create some.
Yes, I think you know, that has certainly made me think as well as a supplier. And going on from I think something Sam said earlier, certainly along the lines of the authenticity, but also of making some small display. So going to, I think you mentioned about going to, you know, trade shows or something like that, having something that actually demonstrates that commitment, just a small visual or some kind of leaflet or wearing a pin or something like that. So that is something that certainly as a supplier I haven't considered previously. And then maybe leading on to that, I am conscious of time, but there's just a couple more really good questions that I would like to pose before we wrap up. So looking then along those lines, but more broadly, another question we had was, how do you recommend communicating that you support the LGBTQIA+ community? And I think this was more on in relation to maybe in a website, so whether that would be through imagery or through text, or how you found that to be most successful. And also, I would like to extend that slightly and to ask how we would do those things, but also, again, like Sam said, maintaining this authenticity and avoiding any kind of equivalent that we see in say in greenwashing, for example, where you can see the lack of authenticity. So please, if anyone wants to jump in and answer any of those bits of that very long question.
Stuart, I think the first step, just like in any sustainability or anything like that, is to look at deep inside. There's a lot that we have to face, again, based on what we've learned through the years, but look at ourselves, look at our company, ask our employees also, what do they think or see? But that's definitely how you start. So at least you have the beginning of something that is really authentic. And then I'll let everybody else go from there.
So I think that it's important when you're looking at the way that you're using marketing and media. If you are only highlighting your couples that you've worked with or people that you've worked with, there's going to definitely be, it's obvious who you work with by what you're putting out there. But if you're somebody who maybe participates in styled shoots or something of that nature, you can always really just be conscious of what and who you're working with. So if there are other brands that are LGBTQ plus inclusive, or if you're recognizing I'm participating in styled shoots with only people who work with white models or only work with thin models or something like that, your inclusivity can go so far beyond just working with LGBTQ plus people. And ultimately, if you're going to be truly inclusive to the LGBTQ plus community, you have to be inclusive of, Black, Indigenous, people of color. You have to be inclusive of people with disabilities. You have to be inclusive to people who wouldn't typically find their ring at a mall store, ring size at a mall store. There are so many aspects of life that you need to be inclusive of, and you can do that by recognizing what brands you're partnering with, by recognizing whose hands you're putting on your Instagram or anything like that, really. And yeah, it does come back down to who you're working with. I think that being conscious of your relationships with other people says something about you as well. So if you are, somebody who has relationships with people who are homophobic, then that says something about you in the industry as well.
I just want to echo, I think, what Brandy and Sam said, because it does start with you, right? It does start with you looking, you learning, and then your team, because if you're saying that you are an inclusive brand, then you want to make sure that everybody on your team is actually part of that inclusive brand. And that's the place to start, and then work your relationships out, and start seeing where you can start being a voice, because some of us are in situations where we can't speak up, we can't speak out, we don't have the resources, we don't have the reach. You get to be partners in making this a safer place for everybody. And you get to learn and grow in the process, because it may be challenging, but it's a beautiful world when you get to create those spaces for people,
What we try to do as much as possible on our website is just have pictures of hands that are either just, not hands in a couple. We've got a few pictures that is one man and one woman, where we just rinsed this one photo shoot we did where it's like this with the wedding rings. But what we actually try to do is keep it so that the images of the hands are individually displayed. So it's not like this ring is for this type of couple, or these rings are for these types of people. And we also try to make it so we do feel authentic. What we do is we collaborate with members in the LGBTQ community to create content themselves around our jewellery. So we did it last year, where we worked with 3 or 4 couples in the community, and they generated their own content that we then used on our Instagram and on our website. And it's something I definitely want to do more of, because it was really fun, and it's a really good opportunity to show that you are genuine. And I do worry sometimes that if I put a lot of content up about being in the LGBTQIA community, that it looks like I'm trying to, I don't know, it's a fine line between showing that you are supportive and an ally and you want everybody to feel comfortable, but if it's not part of a really long strategy and it just shows up here and there, sometimes it can be jolting. And to be honest, in a way, I don't mind that it's jolting, because if people don't like it, then I don't want them to be my customer. And that's what we found when we did this content creation. We found that we got a lot of unfollows on Instagram. And to be honest, I didn't care, because I was almost like good riddance. What will happen is that will then attract people that do align with us more. And I'd rather have those people than just a lot of people that would unfollow someone for putting a picture like that on Instagram. So you've kind of got to be strong in you've got to accept that there are people out there that won't like it, but just, you know, why do you want them looking at your work if they've got that opinion?
I think that is a very powerful statement on which to bring things to a close. Thank you, Emma. Well, I've made loads of notes during this session. This has definitely been one of my favourite open house sessions in the few years that we've been doing them. Thank you again to everyone for being part of our panel. Thank you, Brandy, for facilitating. Thank you to everyone in the audience for contributing. I don't know how to summarize. I think I'm just going to leave it with the thank you. Go away and maybe just think a little bit about how you can be an ally to this community. I think is the running thread that that I've probably written down most times in my notes. It's just the word ally. So maybe give that some thought this evening. But yes, thank you very much. We do not have a date set for our next open house, but that will be coming out to our newsletter in due course, and the topic for that one. So watch out on all our usual social media channels and on the newsletter. So thank you again, everyone. And yeah, we'll see you next time.